Hello pilots and welcome to my tutorial series on War Thunder. This is going to be a series where we get into controlling the aircraft and getting into air combat and ground attack and bombing and intercepts and all of that. But this is the first episode of the series where we're going to cover off on some of the controls of the aircraft so we understand what's happening when we try to do some other advanced things. This is really key to understand exactly what you're doing to the aircraft, because once this becomes second nature to you, you'll be able to just do it and make the aircraft do whatever you please when you're trying to intercept a bogey or bomb someone and all of that. So without further ado, we'll jump into controls on the aircraft. Now, if you've ever ridden in a car and you've stuck your hand out the window and you've kind of played that game where you make a blade with your hand and you're pitching it up a little bit and you can feel the air hitting the palm of your hand and it kind of pushes your hand up into the air. And then you flip it down. You can feel the air hitting the top of your hand and it pushes your hand down. So it's hitting the bottom of your hand's going up, it's hitting the top of your hand and your hand goes down. And you can feel that pressure as you go back and forth. And if you were anything like I was when I was a kid, you would go back and forth and it looks kind of like a snake going down the road as you're doing that. But really, the controls of the aircraft are no more complicated than that. We have panels on the aircraft that's all they do. They just stick themselves out into the wind stream and they'll push parts of the aircraft up or push parts of the aircraft down or push it sideways. So the best example of this is when we're looking at the tail of the aircraft. There's these big panels on the back of the tail. These are called elevators. So what this is going to do is when I pull back on the stick, it's going to make them go up. And you can see them go up right here. So I'm pulling back on the stick and it's pointing up. And this is no different than when you're making the blade with your hand and the front of the blade was lower than the back of the blade. So the wind is hitting the top of your hand like this if you're sticking your right hand out of the window. If you stick your left hand out the window, it's going to be the same. And what this is going to do is where this blade is on the tail, it's going to push the tail down. Now, if I'm flying along and I'm going to push the tail down, well, that nose of the plane is going to come up. So the exact same thing happens from side to side with our rudder. So also on the tail, we've got this rudder, and we can control it like this. You can see it going side to side. So the exact same thing is going to happen. So when I stick it to the left like this and the wind hits that, it's going to push the tail to the right. And when the tail comes right, the nose is going to go left and the aircraft is going to swing sideways and point that way. Just like when we pulled up, the tail gets pushed down and the nose comes up. Now, the only other control surface on the aircraft that we're going to talk about here are the ailerons. So we've talked about the elevator, the rudder. Now we're going to talk about the ailerons. Now these are right where the feet of my lions there are. They're the panels on the wings. And what these do is they act exactly the same as the elevator, except one goes up and one goes down. So we can see this. You can see that near one going up and down. But look on that far wing. When this near one goes up, that one's going down. And when it goes down, that one goes up. So what's going to happen here is when this side goes down, this wing that's nearest to us is going to get pushed up. The wind is hitting that aileron. And it's going to make the wing go up. This other one, the wind's going to hit the top of that aileron, and that far wing is going to go down. So what happens when we do both? Well, the left wing comes up and the right wing goes down. So what's going to happen is the aircraft is going to roll to the right. So let's go ahead and try a few of these and see what happens. Okay, so here we are. We're flying along. We're going to try the elevator first. So remember, what I wanted to do was make the wind hit the top of that elevator. And what that's going to do is push the tail down. And there we go. And you can see the plane goes up. The nose goes up, so the plane goes up. Okay. So I'll push the tail up, and that points the nose down. I'll pull it up again. There we go. Now if we look at the rudder, I'm going to make it go left. That means the wind's going to hit the rudder on the left-hand side. It's going to push the tail to the right. And that makes the airplane turn to the left. Okay. So we're going to try the rudder the other way now. Alright. So you can see the wind is pushing on that rudder. It pushes the tail to the left and the nose goes right. Or the tail gets pushed to the right and the nose comes left. But basically the tail and the nose are always going in opposite directions because the rudder is mounted on the tail. Now the last thing we wanted to try here was the ailerons. And I said that one goes up and one goes down. So the first thing we're going to do is make the left aileron go up and the right aileron go down. And what this will do is it'll push the left wing down and the right wing up. And that's what it's doing. So the left wing is being pushed down, the right wing is being pushed up, and it's just rotating around the airplane. Right now the two wings are just rotating around the airplane. They're both doing the same amount of work and in the same circular direction. Now we can come back the other way. Right now the left wing is being pushed up, the right wing is being pushed down. So that's pretty straightforward. Now you'll notice that the whole time I've been talking about this, the key is we're using the wind. We're using the wind to push on the elevator, we're using the wind to push on the rudder, we're using the wind to press on the aileron, or both ailerons. So what happens when there's no wind? Well, when we start going really, really, really slow, that elevator, if you look in the back, is all the way up. You see? As the plane struggles to stay in the air, it's going too slow, so there's not enough wind for the aircraft to rotate. So that nose isn't coming up like it should when the elevator is at full lock like that. And this is the essence about what you're going to be doing in War Thunder. You're managing your energy. So right now this plane has very little energy. It's not getting a lot of wind over its control surfaces, and in fact you can see up in the top left here the altitude is going down. We're at 16.5, 16.3, 1600 feet, so we're dropping. So not only is not enough wind going over the elevator to continue to pull the nose up, but there's not enough wind going over the wings to keep the airplane in the air, not creating enough lift. And this is going to be your job. We can see. Turn the smoke on so we can see. This is going to be your job, is managing the amount of wind going over your control surfaces and then storing up energy and using it when it's appropriate. So now the question is, how do I know how much energy I have? Well, you can see the difference between where the nose is pointing and where I'm pointing the mouse with this circle up here. We're going to get into something called angle of attack. So I'm just going to turn the engine on here so I don't hit. And as I speed up a little bit, you see they join again. Okay, so what was that? We've already discussed that we have two different kinds of energy. I can store energy up in altitude, which is easy. All I have to do is look to the top left and see what my altitude is. And then I know about how much energy I have stored there. Now, I can't be at 30,000 feet and have an unlimited amount of energy. There's only a certain amount I can use, and it depends on the plane. So If you want to find out, just go into a dive from high altitude with the plane and see how fast it'll go. It's maximum dive speed. If you can get to your maximum dive speed in 10,000 feet, well, then there's an upper limit to the amount of energy you can store, the amount of potential energy you can store in your plane. Anything above 10,000 feet, and you're just wasting altitude as far as energy is concerned. But as far as kinetic energy, it doesn't really matter where I have my throttle placed, because I can be going fast and turn my throttle all the way down to 0. And I still have a lot of kinetic energy because I'm still going fast. It does have something to do with my airspeed, although that depends from plane to plane. But a great way to tell across planes is, we can see here we're doing 115 miles per hour, so plane's flying level. Elevators aren't really needed to maintain level flight, so that's great. And we can look and see in where I want the plane to go and where the plane's actually going are about the same. Well, that tells me I'm in pretty good shape kinetic energy wise. The giant flashing critical speed push nose down message is telling me that I'm about to have a kinetic energy problem. So let's try to pull the nose up, and we'll see what happens. You can see the elevators are really struggling. Now I have a kinetic energy problem, because what I'm asking the airplane to do and what the airplane's actually able to do are two very different things now. And I can tell because those two icons have separated. And the distance between them is going to give you the best idea of how bad a shape you really are. So let's go ahead and throttle up, and we're going to do some high G turns. This doesn't always show itself just at slow speeds. It can be at high G turns as well. So here we are doing 270 miles per hour. I'm going to roll the plane left, and then we're going to jerk on the stick here and see what happens. So you can see I'm a long way away from where the nose is actually pointing. What's happening here is that the further away these two icons are, the more I'm getting close to getting rid of all of my kinetic energy, because you can watch on the airspeed indicator on the top left as I keep doing this, go the other way so we don't get too dizzy, we can see that it's just bleeding off. The game is actually trying to compensate by leveling the plane out, because we just can't maintain flight straight sideways anymore. I can make it do it if I want to. See, now I'm way away. 125 now. So I've lost all that speed. And this is probably where the biggest problem is in people playing War Thunder, is they don't pay attention to their angle of attack. How the plane is actually, what direction the plane is actually flying compared to the direction that your control surfaces are trying to put it. And when you get into this situation, when you're in a fur ball or something like that, that you're way far away for a long time, you quickly get rid of all of your kinetic energy, so you have no reserves. I'm at a low altitude, so I have no potential energy reserves. And now I'm stuck just using the engine to get me energy back again. Eventually, I'm doing 135 miles per hour with no potential energy reserves. What's going to happen is someone's going to come by and kill me easily, very easily. I also can't get away from them, even on web. 175, 190, 200. So it's taken me a long time to recover. By now, someone's turned into me, someone's dive on me, they've shot me down. And that's where most people get themselves in trouble and getting killed, is they run out of energy. They run out of kinetic energy, they run out of potential energy, and as you'll see in further episodes, energy is king. Your preservation of your energy is your most valuable asset, and that's the difference between who gets killed and who doesn't. So what are you supposed to do? So let's come back to low altitude. We're doing about 260. Don't pull the stick that much further away from your nose. Now you can see I'm again going in circles. Yes, my speed is bleeding off because there is a difference between these two. That's going to happen. But it's not nearly as fast as it was. I'm going level flight. at about 600, 650 feet. And I've done a couple rotations, and I'm just maintaining above 160-ish miles per hour. I can keep the icons a little bit closer if I want to. You can see that we're not really losing much speed at all, about 165. And I can turn and turn and turn and shoot, come back, get the nose around again, shoot. And my wings are working very well because I got a lot of nice wind going over them. I'm not at risk of crashing the ground. I can easily come around and maneuver and do whatever I need to do to get behind someone else. Now, this isn't always feasible because someone right now might be pulling on stick as hard as they possibly can to try and get behind you. But use that to your advantage. If you know that they're turning as hard as the game will possibly let them, you know that they're rapidly bleeding off speed. And if they're going to do this, trying to get behind you, now I've done almost a full circle and I'm down to 140. This plane's wings really aren't working very well at all anymore. You can see the game actually trying to level me out because it can't fly sideways anymore. It'll crash me into the ground if I try to keep doing this. You can use that to your advantage and get behind them. Maybe you've been managing your angle of attack here, the difference between where you're pointing the aircraft in the direction it's actually flying. You've been managing that better than they have, so maybe you can come up and gain some altitude or do something that they're not, that you know they're not going to be able to do to get behind them, and then go in for that quick kill. So again, this isn't a great indicator. This is not the best explanation of angle of attack either, but just as far as the game is concerned, we're looking for the difference between the icons, or the lack of difference between the icons. And I think you'll find that although it's hard to keep from getting emotional in the game and pulling as hard as you can, or putting the mouse indicator on someone else's plane and just kind of hoping the plane will do what it needs to do, flying the plane properly, you'll find that you get around in relatively about the same amount of time, but you keep that kinetic energy, which comes in very, very, very handy, and will keep you from getting killed quite often, as we'll see in later episodes. So here we are, turned around, back at the airfield, and we're back in the same situation, doing 70 miles per hour. The plane just can't stay in the air. Now, I said the plane doesn't have a lot of energy. Well, that's not entirely true. There's two kinds of energy the plane can have. We could have a lot of kinetic energy. So we're traveling very, very fast. There's a lot of wind going over the control surfaces. There's a lot of wind going over the wings, and they can do their job very, very well, and that's great. But there's also potential energy. So right now we're up 700 feet in the air, and I can, if I need to, dive down. And I haven't even turned the engines back on. And now I'm able to fly okay. You can see the elevators aren't nearly even being used as much as they were, and now I'm fine. What happened with that? Basically, this is something that you're going to be trying to keep in mind, is that you have two different kinds of energy, and you're going to be trading them back and forth, and depending on your abilities to make the right call of when to use which energy, depends on whether you can be successful or not. So I can use a lot of, now that I'm doing 170 miles per hour, I can use a lot of energy. I have a lot of kinetic energy. I'm fine. I can fly the plane, no problems. But what if someone was below me at 300 miles per hour going in the other way? Well, I could kind of come around in a turn, and now they're going over the runway, going away from me at 300 miles per hour. I'm doing 180. So they're going to pull away from me at 120 miles per hour approximately. They'll be at the end of that runway before I know it and gone. There's nothing I can do. But I forgot that not only did I have the kinetic energy that my plane is stored up in, and that's being created by my engine right now, but I had a lot of potential energy because I have some altitude to trade as well. So we can just say, okay, I might have gained 10 miles per hour during that turn I just did. But if there's an enemy let's say they're coming back, they're going the opposite direction of me and I want to get behind them. Well, I can come around and trade a lot of my altitude. And now I'm traveling at 285 behind them instead of the 180 or up to 220 where I was before. So I've traded a lot of my potential energy that I had stored up in the form of altitude into some kinetic energy to chase them and hopefully get within range to take care of them. So we'll get into this a lot more, and there's a lot of different maneuvers you can do. There's a lot of different techniques to trade energy back and forth, and I'll go over when they're appropriate and how to do them. But in this first episode, we just wanted to cover the basics so that you have the tools you need to know exactly what's going on with the aircraft and hopefully to understand why you're doing things, not just what you're doing. Because it's important to understand why, because that'll give you the context you need to know when to use them. The maneuvers we'll talk about in future episodes. So thanks for joining. If you like this series, please give it a like. Please give it a subscribe. That tells me that you like what I'm doing and that I should continue doing it. I am doing this for you. So let me know, and I'll see you next time.